be relieved. And by relieved, I mean our goal this weekend is to just let you all know, one, that your boys are in good hands, and two, that we have a good plan for you. And tonight is really the official kickoff, and we have a wonderful speaker whom I'll introduce in a minute. But we're really excited, and we've been planning this literally since the day after last year. Things that we can do better and help you and get you all the knowledge that you all need as you all begin the college search process for your sons as well. So hopefully when we all have lunch tomorrow, there's a lot of smiles and everybody feels well armed for the journey ahead. And that's essentially what it is. It's a fun journey, and we're going to be with you every step of the way, and really excited to get going. Before I introduce our speaker tonight, I did want to briefly introduce the college office, and I'll do a more in-depth introduction tomorrow, but kind of starting left to right, Mrs. Gomez, who's our office coordinator, who really manages and keeps me and everybody else in line and answers many of your calls and questions. It is just an integral and key part of everything we do. And she'll be a huge asset to everybody as we go forward. Miss Debbie, who is currently in her 5th year at Salisbury, but has a number of years, I won't disclose how many, a number of years experience in the college profession, advising profession, brings a wealth of knowledge and experience, and has just an incredible touch with the boys, and it's great to work with. And finally, Mr. Phelps, who's in our his second year at Salisbury, but has spent 20 years or so in the education profession, and what the knowledge, experience, and things that he's brought to our office has really been just invaluable. So we're really, really fortunate to have a wonderful, wonderful team. Without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker, Ms. Lindsay Sladen from Fairfield University. As you all can probably imagine, this is perhaps the busiest time of year if you're in the college admissions profession, reading thousands and thousands of applications. And for Lindsay to come and spend tonight and then tomorrow with us is just a huge commitment on her part, and we are absolutely thrilled to have her, because obviously she brings a wealth of knowledge with her, not only from Fairfield, but she has extensive knowledge from working at Peace College, which is a small college down south, as well as, I'll get this right, St. Anselm's, and as well as the University of North Carolina State. Thank you very much, Lindsay. But so, as Lindsay's up here speaking, although she's at Fairfield, she brings with her just a broad range of knowledge, from very small schools to very large schools and everything in between. And without further ado, Lindsay, thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. I think that is one of the most important things, and I appreciate you all being here this evening. I think this is one of the biggest steps that you can take, is to really say, I'm committed to this process, and I really want to be here and learn everything that I can about the college search process. I actually appreciate the fact that I am able to be here because, as mentioned, all I've been doing is reading applications, and it's nice to actually talk to people again, and real people, not just read essays over and over. So thank you all for listening to me. I probably will just continue to talk and talk. So as mentioned, I just want to give you a little bit more information about my background, because yes, currently I am at Fairfield University, but I did start my college career at a small private women's college. And nobody goes to college saying, I want to be a college admission professional. If they do, they've had a wonderful relationship with their college admission officer, or maybe their college counselors, but it's not really the job that you necessarily think of. Normally the people who fall into it, and that's exactly what happens, you fall into it because you are a tour guide at your school, or you're just very passionate about the process, but end up getting stuck in it because it's such a rewarding profession. I am also a graduate of an independent school, so I was fortunate to have a wonderful college counseling office that provided me with opportunities to be able to find direction and figure out what is it that I'm looking for in an institution. So right there you have a head start with that process. So starting at a small private women's college, as you can imagine, a tough sell. Unfortunately, the college has recently transitioned and they are now co-ed. So as you can imagine, it was tough to get those young women to decide to go to a small women's college of about 600 students. But the great thing about that experience was it taught me everything about the process. Everything from recruitment to the actual end up financial aid packages and making that final decision to attend. And I would not change that experience for anything because I feel like that gave me the foundation that I needed to continue in this profession and really helped me find my passion for it. So at Fairfield University, which is where I am currently, just so you have an idea of what it is that I do, I of course work with incoming students. We at Fairfield represent specific geographic territories, so I represent the northwestern part of the state of Connecticut as well as California. So I do my recruitment travel and working with those particular areas. I'm also the athletics liaison, as we are a Division I school, so I work closely with our recruited athletes, which I'm sure some of you out there may have one of those that's in there, so I have a little bit of insight about that as well. But the biggest part and the biggest reason that I enjoy what I do is to help you and your students. And I think that that's what I love most about my job and really helping and making that transition. So now that you know a little bit more about me, I just want to get an idea of who I have out in the audience. How many of you have already been through this process before? Okay, so maybe about half. And the rest of you, all newbies, ready to go. How many of you are nervous when you've been through the process and you haven't heard horror stories? Okay, well hopefully after this weekend, all those nerves will go away and you'll feel comfortable and you'll be ready to go and embark on this process. So the biggest thing is that it is kind of a scary world. The college admission world is a world of acronyms and strange terminology, and the biggest thing that you can do is to not assume anything. Ask questions, whether it's ask questions to your college counselors or ask questions to college admission officers. I will admit, when I was a student and my college counselor said, you should come down and meet with this representative because I think it would be a good institution for you, I hid from him. And I was like, oh, I have a quiz that day. That's exactly what I did. That's how I reacted.
Technology.
But really, I think because I pictured the college admission officer being in there, the one who's going to make their decisions on my application, and it frightened me a little bit. However, that's the best thing your son can do, is to go meet that admission officer. Because right there it expresses interest. Right there it gives the opportunity to have a conversation and to learn a little bit more and have that admission officer get to know your son. So definitely use your resources, and that's something that you'll probably hear me say throughout. So one of the number one things I hear from parents as they get started on this process is parents and alumni as well. If I had to apply to my alma mater today, I wouldn't get in. How many of you considered that? Right? Yes, exactly.
What's your alma mater?
Right. Well, we'll talk about that later. But it is certainly a different process. From when I was applying to colleges, from when students were applying to colleges 5 years ago, the entire process has shifted. And it's become where families are very savvy about the process, students are getting involved in things because it looks good on their college application. So it's almost become another job for them. And that's not what we want it to be. We want them to go into this process to find the right place, to find the right college or university. And that's what the resources are available for. But the biggest thing, it's not just about getting in. Getting in is only the first step. It's about finding a place where your student will be successful, where your student will be comfortable. And that may not necessarily be the place that is the #1 tiered school on that student's list. It may be the place that you never would have imagined that your son would find. But that is what felt right for him, and that's what worked out best. So remember that. That's something key and important to remember throughout this, that there's not one place. There's not one place for your son. There are multiple places. When you go on tours, and many of you may have already started that process, and you ask the tour guide, well, what made you select X institution? 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you because it felt right, because it was comfortable, and it felt like home. Well, yes, that's the feeling you want your student to get. However, they will probably get that feeling on 2 or 3 or 4 college campuses. So it's about discerning and figuring out what is it about those schools that helped him get that feeling, and what are those other pieces that you need to put into place. And that's where your role comes in, especially. You as the parent, as the guider, as the coach, in a way, to really coach them kind of through this process. So one of the most important things that you kind of need to do is set parameters. You need to have a conversation, and you need to get an idea of what it is that he's looking for. Academic programs. Now, I understand it is hard to ask a 17, 18-year-old young man to say, well, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? You can ask me that today, and I can't even tell you. I don't know if I know what I want to do with the rest of my life. But to ask them kind of what areas they're interested in pursuing. Location. Are you committed to having him closer to home? Because maybe he's not close to home right now. Or are you comfortable with him going to many locations further away? Urban, suburban, rural, all things are important to kind of set these parameters and figure out where do you want to start? What is something that you're going for? This is where you can help him kind of take the ideology of it and you can funnel it down and figure out, okay, what is our direction? You can also help him by identifying those interests, his goals, his learning style. What works best? Is he the type who will thrive in a larger college campus where your lecture halls are going to be 250 students? Can he succeed in that type of an environment? This is what you're looking for. You're looking for a place where he's going to succeed academically. But you're also looking for a place where he's going to succeed outside of the classroom. Because the reason that we ask students to demonstrate that they've been involved and they've been active, because we're building a community and we are building a place that we want students to be involved and active. Because to find that balance is really what they're looking for. He can go and be successful academically, but if he's suffering outside of the classroom, those academics may slip. So it's all about kind of finding that balance. It's also about identifying that it's maybe not the best choice to say, I want to go to this institution because their basketball team is winning. They won the national championship. That's great, and school spirit is definitely something you want to look for. There's some really good Division II and Division III schools out there. They may not have the best team, but they have some really great spirit. So help identify those specific pieces and help keep it realistic. That's also where your college counseling office comes in. They're going to help identify lists and help figure out, after you set those parameters and your son goes to meet with them and says, okay, these are the types of things that I'm looking for. They have a wealth of knowledge and a broad range of understanding what's out there. Colleges and universities and different ones that you may have never heard of. So think about that. Something that has also changed this entire process, arguably for the better, is the internet. We have many students who apply to the university that we have never heard of. They've never visited campus. We call them stealth applicants because they just search us online and something stands out and they think, maybe I should explore this. So we read their application, they get admitted, and we may not see them until they actually step foot on campus. But it's all because of the internet. You can do self-guided tours online. You can have online chats with admission officers, with faculty members. You can see all sorts of different things. So it certainly helped the process, but it's also made it more challenging because you do have kind of a wider range of things that you're able to look for. So your job is to help him stay organized. If you can imagine, I was one of those. When I went through the college process, everything was color-coded and it was all in a separate folder. based on the particular school. You don't have to go to that extreme, but I would say, having ways to identify those particular schools and keep them separate is important, because each college or university will have different requirements. They may all use the common application, however, there are different supplement forms. There may be a separate essay that he has to do. So help him stay organized. So whether it's identifying a way electronically that you all can communicate, and there's a different spreadsheet for each of those different schools, really, or identifying what dates and deadlines are out there. Again, the College Counseling Office helps with that process, but this is your way to also get involved through that, and really helps you kind of stay on track with that as well, and keeps you organized in your own sense. If your VP is applying to all small private liberal arts schools, you will probably hear that admission officer talk. I can tell you I've done information sessions for every institution I've worked for, and the student-faculty ratio has remained the same. Even from the large state institution to where I work now, 12-to-1 student-faculty ratio. So things like that aren't necessarily going to delineate, and it kind of help you determine which school is out there. So it's finding your own particular way with that. Another key piece to this process is to communicate with him. You may have one thing in mind. He may have something completely different. You may have set those parameters, but his parameters may shift, and he decides, oh, okay, I want to go in this direction. You may have particular reasons financially that you want him to be in a particular area. The large versus small. He may all of a sudden get in his head that he wants to go to a large school but hasn't visited one, and it can be overwhelming. So that's something, to help make sure that you keep those lines of communication. And maybe it's electronically, maybe it's through an email, because often when you have face-to-face communications or telephone communications, things can get a little heated. And so maybe if you have that chance to write everything down, allows you to gather your thoughts, and allows him to gather his thoughts. And you have the chance to kind of make sure everybody hears their particular point, but you're communicating throughout this process. The campus visit is a very important part about this. I did mention that we have a lot of applicants that may not visit prior to the application process, and may just come after. But when it comes time to do the campus visit, there are a couple of key things to remember. One, it is his visit. We want you there. We love to have you there. You normally ask us all the questions. But make sure he's the one who goes to the desk and says, hi, I'm here to check in. It just shows initiative on his part. It helps us to kind of figure out who we're talking to. Often you may bring a younger sibling, and we're not 100% sure who's doing the college process because the parents are coming to talk to us. We want you there, and one of the biggest things and important things that you can do is to pay attention to the surrounding pieces. When you're on tour, if he's up front talking to the tour ambassador, observe the other students that are on campus, kind of see what it's like in the student center, and do the different things. How are the facilities? Do they keep the campus up? That's the type of stuff that you can really kind of identify and focus in on. And don't grill him when you get in the car. The first question you ask him shouldn't be, so what'd you think? Give him a chance. Let it soak in. Go to lunch downtown. Get a sense of what the surrounding area is like. And then kind of ease into it. It's a stressful process, and I understand that it's something that is overwhelming for every party involved. But it's also a fun process, and we also want you to take advantage of all these different things. Often it's, you get to go to a place maybe you've never been before to do this campus visit. So take advantage of those types of things. Another important piece is to use your resources. I'm going to say that a couple of times throughout this presentation, but I can't emphasize it enough. Use your college counseling resources, but also use the admission officers. I think it's often too difficult when we get close to our deadlines, and that's when we get the phone call from the student or the parent with a dire situation that they need us to talk to us about. And it's something that should have been identified long before. So certainly ask us questions and ask us kind of throughout the process. Remember that this is something that you cannot fix. I know you want to, but it's okay if they get an unfortunate letter, because The advisors here are going to make sure they're going to have a wide range and a good list that's going to cover all different areas. So very accessible areas of colleges that he may be admitted to, as well as some of those that may be a little bit of a stretch. But if he does get a denial letter, unless there is something where you think we got the wrong transcript, you don't want to call and yell at us and tell us that, well, ask us what are our credentials. This has happened, by the way, so that's why I can say that. What are your credentials, and do you have the brain power to process this application? That's exactly what he said to me. So, made me feel really good. We want you to be involved, but we don't want you to fill out the application form. I read an application a couple years ago, and if you've seen the common application, you know there's an area where you fill out information about activities. The student identifies the things that we're involved in. Well, on this student's application, it says, Johnny's played soccer since he was 6. Johnny is in the National Honor Society. This isn't good, because what did that tell me? Mom or Dad filled out that application for Johnny. I've also had situations where the student called me and said, oh, I got a letter from you all that said I was admitted. I didn't even know I applied. True stories. So I think that there is a way to be involved, but there's also a way to be overly involved. So we want to strike that balance. We want to figure out what works. Watch your pronouns. We are not applying to college. We are not going to move in the fall. He is. So something that you all are very fortunate to have already kind of gone through is the separation and the piece of saying, okay, it is okay to move into a different place and be by himself. But the college process does something with parents and people involved. It's a little crazy at times. So, also, do not over-edit the essay. I know the college essay is important, and I know that it's something that it helps us get to know your students. Often we don't have a chance to meet them one-on-one, so the college essay really gives us some insight into their personality. But we also know what a student who's a senior in high school and how he should write. So it's not necessary to over-edit. Yes, please check for spelling errors and simple punctuation mistakes and things like that. That's something as well that the college counseling office will work with. But, let him write and let him kind of voice his opinion. You can advise on kind of subject areas that are inappropriate. But you can certainly do that. Another big piece is to remember honesty is key through this process. Some of your sons may have come to Salisbury and repeated their sophomore or junior year. We all know, we're dealing with young men, often their maturity, they're getting up to that process. And we understand that through our process. So I applaud you if your son is one of those, if he's here for a postgraduate year, that he's taken that opportunity and said, you know what, this is going to be what's best for me academically. Don't hide these types of things. Let us know. So if he comes in for an interview, or he wants to explain it in his application of why he decided to make that decision, it's really going to help us understand him as a person even more. So really make sure that you tell us all those different things. If there was an unfortunate disciplinary action, again, let us know. Don't hide those types of things. Honesty is always going to be the best process through this. So going back to different things that are appropriate and inappropriate behaviors for families, I will share another story about an interview that I was not conducting the interview. We utilized seniors through the process, and so she was a current senior at Fairfield. She called the young man to come in for an interview, and his father was on the phone. So she kind of acknowledged him and just kind of waved and took the young man back for the interview. She sat down, started talking to him, said she had a great conversation to get started. He had met with one of our faculty members, so they talked about that. The next thing she knows, she heard a knock at the door. Dad walked in, sat down, and said, oh no, continue. And, it was a senior in college, and, she's nervous about having this job anyway, and she said, I just couldn't continue, because he's not there for the interview. So help your son find his voice. Not all students may be appropriate for the interview, but if a school does offer them, take advantage of those. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow and those different processes and things you can do and ways that you can be competitive, but it's his interview, okay, not yours. So there are some other important things that I think we need to address because, as I mentioned, the world of college admission has changed and there are a lot of different things and certain trends that are out there. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about specific trends that are kind of going on right now. One of those being the male versus female population. Females are actually applying to college at a higher rate than males. So approximately 56% of college applicants in the United States are females. What does that mean for your young men? Well, they may be looking at a lot of schools that have 60% female, 40% male ratios. Some of them may be very excited if that is the case, coming from an environment with no females. However, one of our coaches actually used that as a recruiting tool. Is a men's coach. It's not, but what we are kind of looking for is we would much rather have it as a balance because, well, it sounds appealing. Your sons also need to have people that they can identify with and that they can participate in athletics with them, that they can, have the guys' night and things like that. So we do our best to kind of balance that out, but that is something just kind of nationally is a trend that's going on. So as you go to college and universities, especially kind of some of the liberal arts, smaller schools, you're going to hear quite a bit that the male-female ratio is going to be slightly skewed on that way. So don't let that scare you, just kind of understand that is based on a national average rates. Also, the number of high school graduates peaked in 2009. So in the United States, the number of high school graduates peaked, and we're in a kind of a gradual decline of students graduating from high school. However, students are applying to more colleges than ever. So just because you think, oh, well, maybe if there aren't as many high school students applying to college, then maybe it's less competitive. That's not necessarily the case because 1 out of 4 students are applying to 7 colleges or more. Now, there could be various reasons for that. Your college counseling office will advise on the best approach for your son and the number of applications that he should submit. However, it's important for you to kind of keep that in mind because when 1 in 4 students are submitting that many applications, it means we have to be that much more selective in our admission process. Because this year, for instance, Fairfield is experiencing a record number of applications. So a record number of applications means we still have the same freshman class size of about 900 students. But just because we have a couple hundred more applications doesn't mean we can necessarily go over. So that's a big piece to consider. So although the numbers, it's also easier to apply. Applying online has transitioned to this whole process. And for the better, because I don't have to read handwriting anymore, which makes it a lot easier for me and interpretation. But it also makes it easier to apply to more institutions, because you can submit the Common App and all that information in there and out it goes. They also have something called a FAST app. So if you've heard of this, some colleges and universities are sending your students partially filled out applications and saying, you look like a really good candidate. Why don't you apply to this institution? You may have never heard of it, it may not be on his list. You may not even ask them and just send it back. I don't recommend that. But, excuse me. But it is something that, because it's easier, doesn't necessarily mean he should apply. You still need to look at those parameters and is it going to be right there? It gets expensive to apply to a lot of colleges and universities. The average application fee is $48. And that continues to increase. So that's something to keep in mind. With more applicants, it also means that we have to be more aware of our overall number, our scholarship opportunities, as well as our wait list. So we have more students that are on the wait list because it's harder for us to predict who's going to come. So that wait list decision is out there. And then if he gets the call off the wait list from us, he's going to let that other school know, oh no, I'm not going there anymore. So then they have to go to the wait list. So it just becomes a different piece. So that's another piece to keep in mind. Finally, something to go back to where I talked about the internet and how it's wonderful for our process. It's also something that your sons have more visibility online. With Facebook, Twitter, I understand we're kind of doing a live feed tonight, and Twitter questions will come in tomorrow. Through the college admission process, social media has kind of taken over as well. It's a great tool for us because we use it to reach out and touch base with students. We have an admitted student Facebook group, which has been a great venue for our admitted students from all across the country to kind of come together and ask questions and get to know one another, and who's from California, what other students are out there, especially when you're looking at coming to Connecticut across the country. It's nice to kind of know that you're not going to be the only one. So yes, it's a great tool, but it's also something that we have to help keep in mind that even though your privacy settings may be super high, it's still all public, and somebody can find it and somebody can do that. Now that doesn't mean that admission officers are sitting in their office looking up each and every applicant. I don't have time for that, I'm sorry. But for those of you who are in the job recruiting world, you know that this is a key piece too, that what is published, what is out there, may come into play at some time. So please help him remember to just be mindful of what he's posting, whether it's a comment, whether it's something that, pictures, things like that. I will share another story of one of the previous institutions I worked for. Again, we don't check Facebook, MySpace, any of those others. But when identified, we have to look into it. So I was working at another institution. We had admitted our students, and I had received an anonymous letter that included pictures from one of our admitted students' Facebook sites. They were incriminating pictures. There were some incriminating comments that the student had made on their Facebook site. And at that point, I had to investigate. So I contacted the student, and we worked with him. He had to come in and meet with the student contact office, and came to us on probation. Now, bright student, great applicant. This was one of his friends on Facebook. So that's something to help your son keep in mind. Know who your friends are, be aware, and be smart about what is out there. That's an extreme situation, however, it is something that occurred, and something that's important to keep in mind through this. Because this technology is great, it's also kind of an open door for a lot of different things. So, in closing, I just want to focus on the fact that this is an exciting process. We've talked about a lot of things, and it can be daunting and overwhelming. And through this evening and into tomorrow, you're going to hear a lot of things, and we're going to throw terminology out of you, and things about the college fair and the recommendations, things like that. But keep in mind that you do have resources available. Once he gets those admission letters in the mail, that is the best part. Watching him light up and figure out what is going to be his next step, and the exciting part about taking that next step, moving him onto a new campus, and helping him kind of find a place for 4 years. One of my colleagues, she has her last daughter who's graduating from college this year. She said to me the other night, she said, I've been in the college world for so long. Now, granted, she still works at a college, but she meets with her, with one of her children. So she's been in it for so long, she said, I don't know what my husband and I are going to do. We've gone to every parents' weekend, we've gone to every, event that she invited us to, and that's the great part about this too. You're able to go to those types of events and be involved throughout that time too. So it's just as much an exciting process for you. She decided she needs to have a new hobby, or she's just going to adopt another college student and go to whatever place that she hasn't been before. But that's how much she enjoyed kind of having a student in the college world. So the members of your college counseling office here are well-respected colleagues. If I have a question, I'm going to call them. If they have a question, they're calling us. And I think that's the key piece to understand with communication, that they're not just kind of figureheads that are sitting in there saying, this looks good, this looks good, this looks good. They are people who are going to reach out to us and say, okay, I'm concerned. This is what's going on. Or, he took this AP course and is not doing so well. What do we do about that? Those are the types of things that you want them to be your advocate in that way. So you have to behave so that they can do that. I mean that jokingly. But yes, you want to make sure that you develop a good working relationship with them as well. I encourage your sons to utilize their resources. I love it when I get to know them. It's great to understand when I actually sit down to read that application and I can say, I met this student. I remember when he told me about his tennis match, because it helps me put a face to the application. When I go into committee and I'm working with my other colleagues and presenting, your son's filed to committee, if I can get excited and passionate about it, okay, so maybe he's borderline or on the cusp, but I think he would be a great advocate to our campus. That helps me that much more. So let them know that they should utilize their resources. We're not scary people. We want to help. And if I'm working with a student and he tells me, well, I'm kind of looking for X, Y, and Z in an institution, and I don't have X, Y, and Z, I'm going to tell him, you know, as much as I like you and as much as I'd love to have you at Fairfield University, maybe you should consider these institutions instead. Because the ultimate goal here is to find a four-year institution for yourself. It doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't have to be the top-tiered institution or have the lowest admit rate in the country or be the most well-known. What it does have to have is it has to have a place where he's going to feel like he'll be successful. And so that's where you want to kind of tie it all together. You want him to find that place and identify and say, this is the place for me, and this is where I want to go. So that way, any questions? Yes, sir.
But what percentage of your students are foreign students?
At Fairfield University, it is a very small percentage of our student population that are international. It's about 8% of our student population. We were talking earlier that our international applications are skyrocketing, and which is, I think is a wonderful, it's an advantage. It works very well. It's a great opportunity for all of our students to really help enhance our cultural diversity within the campus. However, one of the biggest challenges that we have, for Fairfield specifically, I'll speak to that, and a number of other institutions, are financial opportunities for international students. Financial aid is very limited, scholarship opportunities. So if you're dealing with, if you have an international student who's going through the process and you're looking for scholarship opportunities or things of that nature, it's really important to kind of identify that early and ask those particular questions because it does make it a kind of different through the process.
How does it work actually in committee, at the admissions committee? Do the admissions officers advocate for students, or does everybody in the committee know who the students are? And how does that actually define the process?
So the question was regarding admission committee and what actually happens there. Well, this is one of those things that's different at every type of institution. When I worked at North Carolina State University, I made the final decision on every student that I saw. So I was 24, 25 years old, signing admit letters. Here you go, you're admitted. Frightening on my end, but it's a larger process, 20,000 applications, manpower, you had to kind of go through that. Yes, we all had parameters and things, and if there were any questionable ones, we went forward kind of to have a group discussion, but it was very, you know, I made those final decisions. More regularly, and kind of what happens, I think, at smaller liberal arts type of schools, for the experiences that I've had at the other places, yes, I do that. I am able to advocate for students. So as I mentioned, I travel to geographic areas, so I get to know students from those areas. I get to know the schools, and I think that's one of the important things to identify is I have had the same geographic territory for the entire time I've been at Fairfield. So what that allows me to do is I understand the curriculum. I've got to know the college counselors here. I know what types of activities your students are going through, and kind of knowing that what courses are more challenging and kind of what's available to your students here and what they're able to take advantage of. So that helps me kind of through the initial step. So I sit down, I read the application. When I read an application, I read everything I read the application, the essay, the letters of recommendation, and then I read the transcript. Often I can be really excited and surprised. Unfortunately, sometimes I'm disappointed. I get really excited about an applicant, and then I get to their transcript, and it's not so great. But what that has allowed me to do is I've gotten to know him through that process. So then we kind of go through, we read our applications, we make our notes, and then we go forward to a committee. So in our office, the entire admission office comes together, and since we read online, we project the application online, I will stand up and kind of present the student to my fellow colleagues. And if it's that young man where I love everything about him except his transcript, I'm going to present everything it is that I really felt that would make him a strong contributor on our campus. When I get to his transcript, I'm going to point out, the key pieces. We didn't get in this job because we like saying no to students. I didn't get in this because I wanted to deny and I wanted that stamp to just do that. I got in this because I want to help students and I want to help them find a place. So yes, I'm going to try and help advocate for that student. However, if it is a student that academically, test scores, as well as the transcript, their letters of recommendation, I do not feel would be successful on our campus, that's when I have to be kind of honest in that approach too, when I'm going to committee. So as a committee, we will then kind of talk about it, and people will ask questions, and then it may be, I need to get a bit more information, because somebody's raised a question, they want me to get first term grades. When I come back, I'm going to call the college counseling office, and say, can you send me their grades when they're available? We'll go back to committee, we'll discuss a little bit further, and then we'll have kind of a vote and decision. As a school, we are a notification school, which means we have set deadlines, and we mail our decisions on specific dates. So we kind of review applications throughout the entire process. So from when I get an early action application on October 1st to when we mail out our decisions on December 19th, I'm going to constantly be reviewing that. As new information comes in, I'm going to make sure that any new information is brought forward. Rolling admission is slightly different. So in rolling admission, we're going to review the application, and in 6 to 8 weeks, your son will have a decision. So that is slightly different. We're not able to kind of see things on a regular basis that way. So that's just a little bit of kind of detail, hopefully to give you a little bit of information about the committee process.
Can you talk a little bit about the GPA and every school is different, and also the APs, how that factors in?
Sure. You're right. Every school is different, and I think that's where the school profile is extremely helpful, whether for a seasoned admission officer or somebody who's starting out. GPA is a number. A lot of institutions will recalculate a GPA. So for instance, we're going to recalculate a GPA to get a raw score and then a weighted score. So if they've taken an AP course, we're going to add weight to that GPA because it is a higher level course and a more competitive course. Yes, we are looking at the overall GPA. We do look at 9th grade on, and whatever happens kind of between those years. We look for trends. Are there upward trends? Are there, was there one particular year that dipped because of some incident that happened or a transition, things that occurred? So I'm looking for answers kind of in that process. I want to see that a student has challenged themselves. However, we also keep in mind the context of the school. So I want to see that they've challenged themselves in reference to the school, but also knowing that some schools may start at a certain basis, whereas others kind of are a little higher. Their regular level courses are kind of skewed that way. And so really getting to know kind of the curriculum that's available to students. So when I look at a student from Salisbury, I'm considering them based on coming from Salisbury School, not from another high school in a different area, local public high school. So that's something to keep in mind. So although the GPA may recalculate to a 2.67, I'm keeping in mind the fact that they've taken a rigorous curriculum, the types of courses, how they challenge themselves in their senior year. I think one of the key pieces to remember, and this is where you can especially kind of encourage your students, it doesn't stop after you get that admission letter. You've got to keep working through your senior year. We see too many times great students that just kind of drop off. It's because they got their letters and they think it's all done. But really, the first year of college is just 13th grade. You know, so they transition from middle school to high school. Now you're just transitioning from middle school to college. And, I mean, from high school to college. That would be a really smart student from middle school to college. But from high school to college, and they need to be prepared. And so by having those AP courses and that higher level course, they're teaching themselves how to study and be successful. Often we see that student who came out of high school, didn't challenge themselves, straight A student gets to college, and then their first semester is a 2.0 because they didn't learn how to study. So I think one advantage, you know, if you have a young man who's here and who's boarding here, the biggest thing is he's learned how to study by himself. You're not there saying you need to do your homework. You may do that electronically, but you know, you're not looking over his shoulder. So that's a step forward right there. Is you've already taken that opportunity. He knows what it means to study. He might not be great at it yet, but he understands the concept of it. So we really do kind of take into consideration that really their entire environment in context of those grades.
One more.
Oh, yes.
We're gonna have a lot of time.
You have Northwestern Connecticut, so that's the contact person. So as an application comes in from Salisbury, are you assigned to read that and be the focal point within the group? Is that how it typically works?
Yes.
And is that consistent at most colleges?
It is. We try to establish that contact, and it's really to help with that familiarity piece, whether it's interacting with the student or just the familiarity of the school. It may not be that way at every college or university, but it will be identified on their website and how they do that. Most places do geographically look at the various locations, kind of focus on locations because it does make it easier. We travel, we go, we meet, and then come back to campus. I am the primary, but there is always going to be a secondary. So if I get stuck, if I'm not sure, I'm kind of torn, before I go to committee, I send it to another reader because I need a second opinion. You know, we're all human, we need to kind of go through this, and so you do get that second, but they're always going to come back to me to ask those questions about that individual. So yes, I think that's going to be relatively common. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
There were two things that I wanted to add, and one was we had John Gotzig, the fourth member of the team, walk in. He just got back from a ski race, ski practice, sorry. So just want to introduce John, who's now a member of the college office. He's been with us all year, which has been great. And secondly, a little bit to kind of just follow up on some of the things that Lindsay was talking about. You know, our boys, it's pretty interesting, if they've played this thing right, they've gone to the college fairs in the fall, and so they've had a chance to meet Lindsay, okay? Lindsay's been on campus, maybe they've had a chance to meet Lindsay again, there's twice. In the spring, Lindsay will be back up, and we'll do another college fair. That's 3 times. So now, you know, she gets to know, you know, who Johnny is, or who Billy is, and then in the fall, she'll be, maybe over the summer, she'll, you know, visit the college, there's 4. And then she'll be back in the fall, over at a college fair, there's 5. Then she'll be back on campus. There's 6 opportunities alone to meet a college rep. And, you know, our boys have already started this whole process. And so it's really, you know, it was really a neat thing. And the relationship to that, putting a face to that folder, that is a big part of what we try to help our boys do. And Lindsay, thank you very much. That was excellent. Finally, Mr. Phelps is going to take us through a little bit of the next 6 months or so, or at least up until we get back here in the fall, kind of give you an idea of what to expect, and then we'll break the topic. So, Chris Phelps.
Well, first I'd like to say that as a college office, we're really excited about the journey that we're going to be on with you boys. You know, last year was an exciting time for me, and it truly was a journey. You know, and our goal is to try to find the right school for your boys academically, personally, professionally, so they can grow in this next phase of their life. And it's something that we're really excited about. But what I realize, it truly is a journey. And it's, it has its ups and downs, it has its turns, some expected, some unexpected. There's times that it seems like you're traveling at warp speed, and then there's times that it seems like you're bogged down in traffic and you're going really slow. And it is truly a journey. But like any good trip, I think there's some keys to any good trip. And one of it is it takes planning, and it takes understanding expectations. It's about making sure you have all the right equipment for the trip. It's about being prepared for alternative routes in case you run into some roadblocks and some obstacles. It's about understanding that there are going to be surprises on the trip, good and bad, and be able to handle those and expect those kind of things. And also, kind of what we hope is that like any good trip, you learn something. And a lot of times you learn something about yourselves. And that's what we hope that happens with you boys, and hopefully that happens with our office and with, hopefully with you families along the way. But like any good trip, if you want to take a great trip, an exciting trip, you got to kickstart. You actually got to start. You got to take that first step. And we've actually been started this journey with your sons well in advance. We've been doing it. This is kind of the big kickoff. But we have been doing it in groups, and we've done presentations during X blocks and assembly blocks to try to get them prepared for what this next phase of the journey is. And there's two things that I kind of quotes that I like in this journey is that one, chance favors a prepared mind. The more that you prepare for things, the more you learn about things, that chances are that you're gonna get to the right conclusions. And that's kind of what today is, and Lindsay did a great job kind of kicking that off for us. And the other thing that I learned last year is that it's a mile run, it's not a sprint. We don't have to leave here tomorrow knowing where he's going to go to school. We got to get started on this journey. We got to start running, but it isn't a sprint. And I think sometimes when you sprint, you forget to see the things around you. But when you're jogging and you're on a longer run, you get a chance to observe and understand the things that happen around you. So over the next 6 months, I would break down that I would call it a student-driven collaborative approach. A student-driven collaborative approach. And the collaborative part is the college office and the family members that are going to help us. But it is a student-driven approach. We're going to speak to you boys about taking some ownership in this process. And I really say we're going to talk to them, and hopefully you will too, about really 4 areas. One, we're going to talk about engagement. And it kind of kicks into what Lindsay just said about momentum. Is that, we're going to challenge your sons and talk to them about how important it is to stay engaged academically as part of this community. We have a lot of wonderful boys here who have a lot of wonderful talents, and try to get them engaged with things on campus so they can show their talents. Not that just they have them, but they're doing those things on campus. So when it comes time to write an essay, go to an interview, speak to a college rep, that they can express the exciting things that they're doing with their town. So we're going to challenge them to be engaged over the next 6 months while they're here. And also, later on, I'm going to talk about how they can be engaged elsewhere, about job opportunities, community service opportunities, where really they can really kind of chase the passions of this so they can, and find a way to make themselves compelling. We talk about in our office a lot is that, you have a lot to offer, try to find a way that you can make yourself compelling to an admissions officer. So that's one of the things that we're going to focus on over the next 6 months. A big part of it we're going to focus on, number 2, is testing. And there's a lot of anxiety with your sons about testing. We're going to do some things here to help them kind of navigate our Navion system so they can kind of work on college prep. Resources on Navions, and also give them some things in some areas that they can work on by different people they can talk to try to help them better prepare, but also relieve some of the anxiety that they may have about testing. One of the things that's great, and it just doesn't happen at every school, but I think Bobby and the college office does a great job here, is that this is the main site for testing. We're hosting 2 tests. It starts next weekend on the 28th with our first SAT, and then we're going to have another one here May 5th. We have an ACT that will be here on April 14th, and we're encouraging our guys to take those tests, to get comfortable with those tests. When they get the results back, to understand what they mean and figure out ways to improve on those things. But we're really encouraging those guys to take advantage of those tests that are here. The third thing we're going to focus on in the next 6 months is really kind of reflection. I think it's important to kind of know myself, for our boys to look at themselves and say, what kind of qualities am I looking for in a school? And I always thought that's a great question to ask them. What kind of qualities that has to exist in the school for you at least to say that's something I want to consider? That's a great starting point to get them to start speaking about the things that are important. And we're going to do that with them here. Kind of that inventory, that self-inventory, so they can kind of know whether it be, academic interests, whether it be size of school, locations, extracurricular activities, if you have special talents. And hopefully when they leave here, what our goal is for them to have probably a fairly large group of prospective type schools that they want to consider, that they want to think about, that have the qualities that they think that they want. And so hopefully when they return back to us in the fall, that we can move some of those from prospective things to active application of schools that say, yes, these are the things that truly I am looking for, because they've learned something about themselves in this reflective part of the process. And then the fourth thing that I'll say that we're really going to emphasize, and I think our boys are doing better at it, but we can get a lot better at it, is at visits. Every visit is a good visit. Even if you go to a school and you get on campus and you realize that this is not a place I'm going to go to school. That is a good visit. Because what you've learned, again, you've learned about yourself, about what you don't want in the school. So when you're trying to you're juggling your schedules to find out what is the next trip I'm going to take, and if you realize it's something that you disliked about a school exists at the next school, you may want to refocus what is going to be the next visit. And where we would encourage you to take those visits this spring break. We want you to take those visits over the summertime. And I guess I'm going to challenge you guys, because they need your help in this area. There's some places that are closer, and they may not, but they need some help getting to places. They need some help navigating the process to begin with. Lindsay said it's their process, but I always like to use the terms like somebody climbing a mountain, being that safety net underneath them. Is that you're about 3 feet underneath them, and so if they slip, you're there to catch them so they don't fall too far. But as soon as they get their feet, back underneath them, they can start climbing on their own again. They need that during these early college visits. And I think that's important. And it does take some sacrifice. Every year, we tell guys, did you go on any visits? And they say, no, we went on vacation instead. Or we did all these different things, and they realize that they missed an opportunity to get out to some schools. So it may take some sacrifice and shuffling some schedules. But it's going to be important later on to help with the anxiety. As I mentioned to you, chance favors a prepared mind, is that when it comes time when they get back into the fall, as you know, this is a very busy schedule here. We're here on Saturdays taking classes. It's tough to get away when we get back to school. They have to miss things. What do they typically have to miss? Saturday classes. If you go back up to the first engagement part, we want to keep that academic momentum going. So if they're missing classes, is that helping their academic momentum? Not the way it should be. So we'd like to get a lot of those visits taken care of during the springtime, during the summertime, during the breaks. So if we have to revisit, we're revisiting places that we know that are really kind of high on our list. And those would be the 4 things that I would say that we're going to be focused on over the next 6 months. We welcome any kind of questions that you may have. So your sons better than we do. So if there's some things that maybe we don't know that may be helpful to create, that helps us in the dialogue, we'd love to be able to have some input with that. It will take phone calls at any time, but hopefully when we come back in the fall, we have a resume that really kind of shows what your boys are like. Not just on paper statistics, but who they are as people and what they can give to a college or university when you get there. And I think, Lindsay probably would agree with us, is that, they want to bring in good students, but they want to bring in good citizens, good community members, people who are going to add to the experience there. We want to come back in the fall, talking about understandings of what we're looking for in a school, and with a great understanding about the places we visit and what we learn from. I think a lot of times us as counselors, when you go on a visit, I don't need a long dialogue. I want to know, what did you like, pluses and minuses, what didn't you like? Because that helps me understand about, what I can help guide you in. Say, well, if you really like this, you might want to consider this school because it has all those things that you just mentioned that you're looking for. And that helps us in the process. So that's what you can kind of expect from us, and again, it's a collaborative approach. So if there's anything that we can do to help out, please feel free to pick up the phone and call us. That took a long time to get it
Well, that concludes this portion, and tomorrow we take another bite. And thank you, Chris. Thank you, Lindsay. That was excellent. And hopefully, this is our first step together. And tomorrow will be another step. So we'll open the doors, and everybody's welcome to a refreshment, and we can meet them. Thank you.